Okay, welcome back. Hello again. We're on part 4 of hosting deep learning apps with AWS, specifically AWS Lambda. Not the only tool we're using. We're using a few more. And as we'll see in this part, in this stage 4, if you like, primarily we're going to be working still in Linux as we were in stage 3, but you'll see all of these components coming together. Serverless Docker, ECR as well really is essentially the basis of the endpoint for accessing our deep learning app. So let's bring up our architecture. First of all, if you recall in the last video, this was stage 3, we provisioned, well, get serverless Docker, the infrastructure as code underpinning what we're doing here. That's going to continue in this stage 3 and 4. There's a lot of interfacing between the two stages. So in this stage, we're going to start off by pulling from GitHub our code base into our EC2 instance, which we're using Linux for, if you recall. We're going to build a Docker image and then push it to ECR. That is essentially, at the end of this stage, what you should see is our app running on AWS. So with the deep learning interface, it won't be fully operational yet, which is why obviously we have stages 5 and 6. The reason for that is because we've not hosted our model yet. But let's get started on stage 4. We'll go through quickly these steps that we're going to employ first of all. And again, make use of those steps. Keep it in the background as a reference. This is now stage 4, which you can find under Genuinely Tech blog, stage 4. The sub-steps we're going to start with, as I mentioned, pulling that code base from GitHub. We're actually going to fork first and then clone. I'll explain what those two things mean in a second. Then we're going to build the Docker image, create an ECR repo, tag the container image to match the repo name. These two things have to talk to each other. Lots of the problems that you get doing this involve interfaces and authentication. You've got to get them right. You've got them matching names everywhere, of course, with the right IAM policies in place. We'll talk more about those as well in stage 6. We're going to register Docker to ECR, and then we're going to finally push the image to ECR, and there may be some debugging involved in that final step. That's it for stage 4. So it's about the same length as the last stage. Let's get started. All right. So I've got my Linux EC2 instance open. Since I just reopened it from stage 3. If you've still got your old Linux screen open, I would suggest just do exit, disconnect, and reconnect from the console main screen for EC2. Okay, so first step, we want to fork the GitHub app code base. Now I'm going to show you what to do. The forking is essentially just copying the code base within GitHub. So if you click on the link that's there in our web page, I'm referring to this one here in subset 1 under stage 4. Okay, it will open up a repo. Forking is essentially just, I'm not signed in here, but there's a fork button at the top where you can press, and that will copy it into your own GitHub account. Still on GitHub. I recommend you do that first. You don't have to do it first, but if you do it, then you've got a backup on your own account, and then, as it suggests, we want to clone it And the clone, as opposed to a fork, is where we're copying the code base from GitHub to a local machine. In this case, it's an EC2 virtual machine. So just to check before we do that, if I do ls, we can see there's that project folder we created in stage 3. And I did mention in stage 3 that that's got to correspond to the name of the repo folder. So again, that's the repo folder is the last bit of the URL there, or if you're in GitHub, it's the last part of the path. Okay, so that's going to correspond. The way we've designed it, we've made it so that it corresponds. You don't have to do it that way, but if you're creating a new folder, or you've forked and renamed it in GitHub, for example, and then you do a clone, it's going to create in your local machine a completely new folder. So just as long as you're comfortable with that, you can then go and do the remaining tasks from that folder instead. But in our case, we're just using the same Lambda DL AWS folder. Okay, so the clone command is git clone. We've already installed Git in stage 3. Right click and then paste that URL from the web page, or take it from the GitHub page, doesn't really matter. Okay, and that will clone into the folder. Now, very quick, let's do ls again. Okay, just check what's inside the subfolder. So we're still at the root of the project here. We're going to cd into change directory into that subfolder that we created, Lambda DL AWS. You can type in LEM, press tab, and it'll autocomplete there. Press enter and then ls. What you should see underneath that subfolder, just close this bit here, a little bit sticky there, but you can see those are the files that have come from GitHub. We've just cloned those, and that's what we're going to use to build this Docker image. So that's sub-step 1 done. Inside this subfolder, Lambda DL AWS, we're there already. You can see it in the path name at the bottom of the screen. Okay, just always double check when you're making these commands, you're in the right folder, not the root in this case. Okay, let me just put that in again. I've pasted the GitHub repo instead of the Docker build command. So if you copy that, right click, paste, plain text, there we go, straight from the web page. That will start the build. And that will take a few minutes to run. Fairly quick. It's gone through steps 4 up to step 4, and now it might take a little bit longer because we're doing the Python library installs, as you can see there. Okay, so that's completed. It takes a couple of minutes, especially that last step 4 of 5. Will take a little bit longer because there's a few Python dependencies involved there, which you can see from the requirements file. So if you want to quickly check those, you can always have a look on the GitHub account, either the source or your forked repo, and you can see in there those get installed, as well as some dependencies, intrinsic dependencies that they have. So after a few minutes, that should complete. We now need to create an ECR repo. So that's a command. This is sub-step 3 on the web page. So that is good to go now. I'm using EUS 1 here. So if you're using a different AWS region, obviously update that. It should broadly be one that's closest to you. Just run that command as it is. Okay, now in my case, I've got an error message here about unable to locate credentials. if you get that, what you need to do is set up your credentials, essentially connect with them from Linux. We haven't done that yet. So, and you'll be prompted for a few things. Your access key, first of all. Now, this is what you get when you set up AWS. If you've forgotten about that, what you can always do is go back to your console here. For instance, I'm just opening, clicking on the logo there to open the main screen. Type in, for example, IAM here. You should see under users, open up the user that you're logging in with, and then under security credentials, if you scroll down, your access key is there, and a secret key would have been created with that at the time that you created your user, just after you created your account. So you should have that stored somewhere safely. If not, you can always create an access key and it'll give you a secret as well, which you see store safely. Now, back in our Linux EC2 instance, I'm just going to paste in the access key. There it is, the secret key. I'm just going to put up and blur out, obviously. Okay, default region name. Well, that is EU West 1, dashes in between. Output format, you can ignore that, just press enter. And we should be good. Now, we've established our credentials, so you need to go and rerun that last command where we got the error message. So I was creating an ECR repo substep 3. Rather than copy and pasting again, just press the up arrow on your keyboard. There it is. Cycle back twice. You find your previous command, the previous command that we ran. Run it again. And you should see a JSON format there, confirming that that's all good. Okay, so I've just reset Linux there because sometimes when you paste in commands in, if you don't do it exactly right, it might fill up the screen. You can either break out of it with Control-C, basically resets and you'll get back to the path, or you can, as I did, just exit, sometimes better, and reconnect. But we've already created our ECR repo. I wasn't sure because it came up with some doubled up with the command. Just to check that, what you can do, just run the command again. If in doubt, okay, and it tells me that an error occurred because the repo already exists. So we know that command was fine. Step 4 is to tag the image to the repo name. So copy that command in. Now, at the moment, we can't run it as it is because this is a template command. It's saying AWS account ID and region in tags there. We need to replace them with the actual region that we're in and the account name. So EU West 1 and my account ID is, if I can find it, this is mine here. Now, if you're not sure what your account ID is, I'll just run that and then I'll show you. Let's run okay. If you're not sure what account ID is, again, go to IAM Management Console in the top right corner, tells you your account ID right there, and you see a copy button right beside it. Okay, so step 4 is done. We need to register Docker to ECR as well. That's step 5. There we go. Again, we need to replace some things here. Region, again, closest region to you where you set everything up. Account ID. I'll use the console root for that. Copy from there. Right click, paste better always to paste if you can rather than manually type these things out to avoid errors. AWS1, and then that's us. Okay, so we've logged in, we've registered Docker to ECR, and finally need just to push the Elastic Container Registry in AWS. With this push command, again, a few changes here. EU West 1 and with your account ID, enter to run that command. What you should see, hopefully, if that's all worked, is it is pushing the image to ECR and it's updating and live for you. So that might take a few minutes and just let it run. If you get some errors saying messages saying waiting there, something's wrong, and you may leave it maybe a minute or two, but then if you control C it to break out, it's likely that you've either missed out one of the previous steps, or if you're working with a different folder name, for example, that could cause problems. But if you follow the steps that we've just gone through in this video and on the website, keep the same folder name, project name as was defined in the GitHub repo, then it should flow through seamlessly. So we're picking up our code base, the source code, Dockerizing it here and pushing it to ECR. Okay, so that's done. We're pretty much at the end of the process, but we need to obviously view the app on ECR actually through AWS API Gateway. Now we have pushed the Docker image to ECR, so it's probably worth checking a couple of things here at this stage. And just if you go into the console, type in ECR Elastic Container Registry, what you should see is here the repo that we've just created, the ECR repo that's just been created. If you open that, there's an image behind it, and note those will accumulate the number of times you redeploy. So you've got to be careful because they can fill up. There's limited space. Something like 500 megabytes. So if you do 10 redeploys, you probably hit the limit. So go back and you just need to click on them and delete the old ones. Keep the latest, always keep the latest, but delete the old ones. So that's there, it looks good. Let's do the full deploy with serverless. SLS deploy is the command. If you remember in stage 3, we need to be in the right folder here. We're at the root. So if you do ls, that is our project folder underneath. So we need to cd into that. The same way we did earlier, just type out the first few letters, cd, first few letters, and tab will autocomplete. ls tells us there's all our files. You can see serverless is in there. That file, sort of worthwhile having a look at it on GitHub. We've cloned it from the project folder there. So this YAML file looks like this. It sets up a number of different config parameters, obviously the region that we're in, the serverless container that we're creating with this, as well as some endpoints and image types, which are important later when we're actually interacting with the app. We're now inside that folder, so we can redeploy SLS or try the deploy command again. Okay, and that's going to take some time. It can take up to 5 minutes. We may hit a problem with already the container image being too big, in which case we'll need to do a prune. Okay, you can see there, it takes a rather long time just to get something like 3, maybe even 4 minutes to get to this stage it says updating CloudFormation, AWS CloudFormation stack. That's their infrastructure as code mirror, if you like, for this, to get the deployment done. That is quite close to the end of the process. It's quite close to the end of the process, so bear with it. Okay, so we are done. Should only take about 1 minute when the CloudFormation stage comes up on the screen. You can see now it's completed. It gives you some endpoints. Save those because that is essentially the URL for your app. I'm going to take first one there. That's all you need. Copy that. Now, because this is the first deploy, what you might find is going to take a little bit while to load. It's a bit sticky. After it's up and running, it's much quicker to open. And you might have a little bit of latency at the start, 20 seconds or so, but then it will open and it's interactable at that point. So we'll let it run just now. And you may get this timeout message. So refresh it a few times. Okay, and there it is. So after a few minutes on that first deploy, you should see this screen. That's our app up and running. The interface is all there. What isn't there, only at stage 4 of 6, is the model. So even though we can click there, we've got some sample images here that we're going to use for this. I can put them in and press the run button, and now get a blank screen because there's no model yet behind that. So that's basically the focus for stage 5 and 6. Stage 5 is all about training the model, and then we're going to export it as a TF TensorFlow Lite model. And for storage reasons, it's much more compressed. And then stage 6 is the final tweaks that we need to use to make sure that the image is rendered on the screen and read in correctly. And that involves some config in S3 as the AWS model is to ensure that you're sending the uploaded image to S3 and bringing that back into the model to perform inference. That's a bit more tricky. So we'll cover that in stage 6. But that's the model deployed with serverless. So thank you for listening. Hope that's been useful.